Hey, how are you? SliceofOtaku, and I want to talk to you all about the Queens of Mewni we now know more about thanks to the newly released Star vs. the Forces of Evil Magic Book of Spells. And guys, there is just so much lore and attention to detail in this book that we have to take our time consuming it. And I can think of no better way to kick things off than by discussing my now absolute favorite queen in the known history of Mewni, Skywynne Butterfly. And believe it or not, Skywynne is Star's personal favorite too, and as such, her chapter is the only one Star had read in its entirety, so hopefully after watching this video, you'll understand why. Now, Skywynne's era, the era of the Hourglass, was one forged by adversity. First and foremost, Skywynne began her reign as the 27th Queen of Mewni at the young age of 17. The reason for this being that her mother, Lyric Butterfly, found her queenly duties to be, quote, boring, preferring to live in some sort of vacation home within a volcano. Now, for her to hand off the crown this quickly to her daughter so that she may relish in a life of leisure is some next level irresponsibility, and is also really inconsiderate. Sure, the job of being a queen is no doubt a tough one, but to pin that onto your young daughter who is yet to fully develop as a person herself and couldn't possibly do as you've done, quickly handing down the crown because she wouldn't have a child of age for likely over 2 decades, is cruel. But lucky for us and the future of Mewni, Skywynne happens to be the complete opposite of her mother. But beyond being young, Skywynne is also rather short, being only 5 feet or 152 centimeters. And when being honest with herself, she recognizes that she's not exactly the fairest of them all. But it is because of her shortcomings in these departments that she's grown to prioritize her own intellect and is undoubtedly a genius. Skywynne actually found many faults with the past leadership of Mewni, even beyond her mother, going as far as to blame them for the continuous waves of famine and raids by monsters. But what truly made her position most trying of all began with her wand passing ceremony. Her mother, being someone fixated with appearances, decided to make it quite the grand spectacle. Valued entertainment professions such as mime, songstrel, and jester were present even back then, and so her mother had all of them, along with some dragons who turned out to be poorly trained. These dragons broke loose, not only reducing the stage to cinders, but they even made their way to Butterfly Castle. Skywynne, recognizing this to likely be the end of the castle, pleaded with her mother to retrieve the single most important butterfly heirloom beyond the wand, the compilation of incredible magic and knowledge of their past, the Magic Book of Spells. Back then, Butterfly Castle was comprised of quite flammable wood, as it was partially made from the body of the stump, which Skywynne didn't actually believe in, and I mean, maybe this is her fate for being a non-believer because, as we all know, the stump is real. But yeah, the castle was burning down really fast, but Lyric, with her wand in the shape of a magic broomstick, was able to make her way to it pretty quickly. Now, Queen Lyric does actually bring back a book, but it's the Great Book of Fashion, a book used by every queen in order to decide the style of fashion associated with their reign. And yeah, that's what she decided to recover. Did I mention that she's irresponsible? I mean, as if giving the crown to your daughter at the age of 17 wasn't enough. Now she has to go on without the knowledge of her predecessors. And I mean, her own mother was certainly no beacon of inspiration either. She valued a rather replaceable book of clothing over the history and potential future of the butterfly family, as well as the dude that lived in it, Glossaric. But it was through her mother's utter incompetence that Skywynne was motivated. Motivated to be a better queen than her mother ever was, to rebuild Mewni, craft a brand new magic book of spells, and push beyond the current bounds of magic. Now, in terms of her wand's composition, when Skywynne first took it as her own, she could feel the magic spinning within herself. She saw time as an infinite paradox. It wasn't forever forward, nor was it forever backward, but rather in a repeating, continuous circle, and from there, her wand took the shape of a clock. The face of the wand being made of moonstone, and strangely enough, it apparently smelled like licorice. This wand also ran on a combination of black onyx crystal and unicorn tears. And the crystal of her wand took on the appearance of the hands on a clock, and when observed closely, the hands are also made of black onyx. The unique trait of her wand being the bells on top, which produce a sound only heard by ferrets, dogs, and pig goats. And finally, her mill horse was known as Bartholomew the Brave, an old horse who also served within Queen Lyric's wand, still going on strong. And from there, let's now talk about some of her experiences with magic. 2 years into her rule, making her 19, Skywynne had already concocted a number of spells. At this time, the people of Mewni had become rather restless, losing their faith in the crown. They were unhappy with their conditions, but also too lazy to actually put in the effort to rebuild things at an ideal pace. It wasn't until her mother visited her in an attempt to get her to wed a prince of the waterfolk that Skywynne accidentally created the spell Infuriating Repeater, which caused time to, you guessed it, repeat itself. But it wasn't as if everything repeated, as change to the world remained. It was more like it was the same day once again, and only Skywynne retained her memory of the days repeated. And it was with this spell that Skywynne convinced her people that if they worked together to rebuild, they could do so in just a single day. And so they worked, because if anything, they could complain and have an excuse to blame the royalty for their problems if her word wasn't kept. And they did it. In a single day, they were able to rebuild Butterfly Castle to be bigger and more beautiful than ever, which is what we now have in the current age. Everyone had a home inside of it, and Skywynne had won their favor in a single day. Well, actually, that one day was really 5 long years, but whatever. It was then that she was dubbed Skywynne Queen of Hours. And man, it's things like this that make Skywynne one of the coolest queens ever. This is just one of many absolutely broken, busted, overpowered spells that she's created. I mean, let's think about this some more. With this spell, if you really wanted to, you could live forever as far as aging goes. In the span of a physical day, Skywynne mentally aged 5 years, meaning she possessed the intellect of a 24-year-old, only 2 years into her reign, pretty much making up for her young age as a queen. And that only accounts for this one instance. Who knows how many other times she's used it and for how long? You could have all the time you need to perfect spells, you could redo negotiations until you have the utmost favorable outcome for Mewni. Really, the potential for this one is pretty much limitless. And I suppose you could argue that one potentially horrible resultant of the spell could occur if the user were to meet their demise during it, as there's a chance the dimension could just repeat the day indefinitely with no way of stopping, since you have to recite the cantation backwards to break it, but it's still awesome. But anyways, during her third, I guess, physical year as queen, she created a spell capable of creating food out of solely magic as to combat the hunger crisis. And although it's edible, it's nowhere near as good as actually cooked food, but it got the job done. And beyond that, she made plenty of other spells. Spells that stopped all of Mewni from rotating, turned adversaries into dust at the expense of propelling yourself into the future, shaving off your lifespan, moving forward in 10-minute intervals, freezing time, raising the dead, etc, etc. She is a beast. During her 4th physical year as queen, Skywynne was just all around frustrated. Her people had not only grown lazy, but also grown in size due to the constant rain of food upon them. They'd come to expect to be showered in food, and thus no longer appreciated what their queen had been doing for them for the last year. And this constant stream of food also attracted the unwanted attention of some ravenous monsters. And to top it all off, the man she had a crush on for over 2 years now had a girlfriend. So being fed up and emotionally all over the place, she retreated to the uninhabited Dimension 811. And from here, we have Skywynne's first time dipping down, and it is absolutely terrifying. With her mind swirling from all these negative emotions, Skywynne craved for destruction, and destroy she did. With her cheeks glowing and her wand shining even brighter, she slowly rose upward until she couldn't contain her power any longer, and she destroyed Dimension 811. Let's put that into perspective. This is Skywynne's first time dipping down, and during this first, absolutely inexperienced, unguided instance, she achieved a feat far beyond anything we have ever seen throughout the entirety of the series. Skywynne is the real deal. But you know what? Doing so really disturbed and scared Skywynne, shaking her to her core, leaving her in a depressed state for some time. It's likely that no queen had ever pushed the limits of magic to the degree that she had, and she hoped none would going forward, as the power that she possessed was beyond that which a mortal should grasp. The impact was so severe that she wouldn't write in the Book of Spells for another 6 years. But when her mother came to console her, she once again remembered her vow to be better, realizing that if she could annihilate an entire dimension, she could at the very least be able to fix one as well. And man, you just gotta love her determination. To start things off, she declared that she would no longer make her subjects food out of magic and that they would instead work for their own. She cleared out the surrounding forest area as well as the monsters that lived there, which would have some historical ramifications going forward, but we'll get to that in later videos. But yeah, this would provide the humans with room to plant crops, which would mostly just be corn. And with that, in only 5 years, the population of Mewni doubled, leading them to claim more and more monster territory. Skywynne also taught her people how to fend for themselves and fight off monster invasion. And with this newfound independence, things such as the arts flourished. The Skywynne Institute of Unmagical but somewhat gifted children, a mouthful I know, was also established. And Sir Gem Robin, the man she had a crush on all those years ago, was newly divorced, and so Skywynne shot her shot and the two would go on to be married. And 3 years later, during her 13th physical year of ruling and 30th year of life, Glossaryck would return, which for me just reiterated how magnificent Skywynne really was. As far as we know, she technically ruled for over 18 years, all without so much as a word of guidance from Glossaryck. That is insane. And although Glossaryck was preoccupied disciplining Romulus or whatever, for him to be able to make that call, as he approaches tutelage differently with each queen, for him to decide that Skywynne would be fine on her own from the very beginning is nuts. Skywynne would later go on to craft what she considered to be perhaps her greatest spell ever, which I humbly disagree with, but yeah, this is the Warnicorn Stampede. Remember that this is the only chapter of the Book of Spells that Star read in its entirety, so yeah, this is where her signature spell originates from, and it is glorious. Skywynne would also have 2 children, her firstborn being a son named Justin, and her second, a surprise of a baby girl named Solaria, both of which I will be covering in preceding videos, so if you enjoyed this one, be sure to look out for more. And guys, please let me know what you think about Skywynne in the comments, because like I said, she's my favorite queen, which I didn't think was possible with Eclipsa being right there, but this chapter had too much greatness for her not to be. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.